Excellent. Thank you very much. And also thank you for allowing me to be mobile. Great. So yes, I heard a hint about the 15 minutes has arrived. And I would also tell you in advance, now that I'm talking about standards a little bit, if there is more discussion, please come out and visit us over there. That's a booth. This is also why I have to be rude, unfortunately, excuse myself that I have to go back after the talk. But this is an opportunity then to deepen each and every aspect you may have, because now, okay, pull out your tomatoes. I'm editor of the DataCube standards in OGC and ISO. So we can discuss each and every aspect of it. So first, terminology. When we talk about the big things, we have the feature concept, as we all know, which is some kind of geographic object. And coverage is a special type of feature. It is something that you can define abstractly as some space-time varying phenomenon, if that helps you. Well, typically, people prefer some more concrete definition, and in practice, actually, coverages represent regular and irregular gridded data, so raster data, and point clouds and general meshes. And as we know, typically the coverages are the big data that we encounter, and especially the raster data, the gridded data, are of importance today. And so this is where people typically focus. But actually, it's not everything. So coverage can be gridded, that is that part, and can be the other things. Other things because I will ignore them here for our discussion. Historically, grid coverages were defined as raster data. Then it turned out, okay, that was not actually enough information, so today we would not use that. Rectified grid coverage was there to define ortho images. Okay, that is in use, and that works out nicely. And everything else that's not ortho-rectified was called a referenceable grid coverage. I'm sorry for that name, I'm not guilty, it doesn't say so much. In the end, it's irregular grids. But actually, at some time, we thought we could bring that together and unify it. And so in the version 1.1 of the coverage standard, actually we find a general grid coverage which unifies, gives one integrated and a little bit simplified presentation of the whole thing, so that hopefully the world gets easier that way. Actually talking about the standard, CIS stands for Coverage Implementation Schema, and that is the, let's say, concrete standard. Concrete in the sense that it's interoperable. We have compliance tests in place that test down to single pixel level whether an implementation does the right thing. This is paired by an abstract standard, which is OGC Abstract Topic 6, and that is an abstract model. So it just defines concepts. I'm emphasizing this because sometimes people say the companion, the identical standard, ISO 19123, is what they refer to. You can do that, but this is too abstract. You will not be interoperable. And you can see that typically because they come with their own clients. So only compliant to itself. Currently 19123 is being reshaped into 19123-1, and CIS actually has become already 19123-2. So you see the schema behind that's happening there, and so fortunately ISO and OGC are really in lockstep synchronization. It's the identical standard. Good for the implementers. Okay, and that is actually what you typically call data cubes. It's just multi-dimensional rasters, more than 2D like we had in the past. Okay, the structure actually is really simple. Such a coverage happens to be a feature, but a special one that has a domain and range set. Domain says, where do we find data? Range set, what are the data? Okay, we need to explain what these data are. So we have some type definition, which is actually taken from SWE common, this range type, and that helps us actually carry over. If you have data coming from the observation and measurements world, they will have exactly such a definition. And that carries over one-to-one into a coverage, so you have no information loss. That is the coverage as such, but typically you want to have extra describing metadata. And so there is a bag where you can put in literally anything, and it will be transported duly. The coverage will not understand it, but the connection is there. Anticipating what I want to discuss later on, actually this is the point where Inspire metadata would fit in nicely. Okay, now if you want to encode it, some people like XML, it would look like this one. If you are not so much into the angles, but you more like curly braces, maybe this is what you like. And if this is still not what you expect, maybe you like triples and you like large sets of triples, then you can do the same thing in RDF. So I get the idea. This concept of a coverage, this structure, can be encoded in manifold different ways. Of course, also in your favorite binary formats, but that's a little bit difficult here for my slide. And it's always a coverage. Okay, so that's about the data structure. Now the corresponding service has tentatively been separated. A coverage could be served by a web feature service. I mean, a coverage is a feature. It's just that the web feature service does not offer appropriate functionality. If you want to download a coverage, and this is 10 terabyte, that's not really what you want. You want to do subsetting, for example, and that is in the WCS core functionality. Subsetting actually is differentiated into trimming. So take a cutout of the same dimension, two-dimensional cutout from a two-dimensional image, three-dimensional cutout from a three-dimensional data cube. And there is slicing. Like, say, get a two-dimensional slice out of a time series, or get the history of a pixel. So this obviously reduces dimensions. This is 1D, and that up there would be two-dimensional. So we can nicely walk through the dimensions, and we can extract and get out what we want, and encoding on the fly allows us to choose our favorite format. That is the core. It's as simple as that. And any web coverage service must support that. There are extensions that add further functionality facets, but these are optional. An implementation may or may not support it, which is good, by the way, for agencies, for example. If you want to order some Inspire compliance service, then you can say, I want this and this and this extension, and the vendors will exactly know what they have to deliver. And you will exactly see what they deliver, because there are conformance tests for each of these extensions. Okay. So this allows you to have a WCS that is simple or more enriched with particular functionality. Here's a concrete example. Sorry, going down to the level of web requests now for a moment. So actually, you would say a request equals get coverage. That is the workhorse. And that coverage ID is what you want to get. So you can download that. By the way, these data you get completely unaltered. Why am I emphasizing this? Because a web map service, for example, delivers an image. You cannot feed that into a WebGIS. Think about elevation data. You would get color values. No GIS can handle that. Here, you get the elevation values unchanged. So a WebGIS can digest that. If you want to do subsetting, you just indicate per axis what you want. So an interval at longitude and latitude gives you a trim, and say, slice point here in time gives you a slicing. So this would exactly materialize this two-dimensional extraction. Oh yes, and the format, finally, if you want to have a particular format, you just indicate it. It's identified by its MIME type, and that's it. That is the core, not more. I will skip that one. It's very dear to me, but that's not what you wanted to see as a user. As your users, actually, you have your tools. And the standards actually allow you to stay in that world, because anything that supports the W-something S standards can be used as a client to go to the data. And so you may want to do something as simple as map navigation, or you want to do WebGIS, or up to analysis. All of that is possible via the standards interfaces, and there are actually adapters. Sometimes we even have provided that, and we have helped GDAL, for example, implement WCS2. And so we have a nice ecosystem of clients and servers that you can combine. So just a few impressions what that could look like. Here we have virtual globes. That is ESA EO Data Cube, where there is data fusion and time series analytics combined, ECMWF, river discharge, and NCI Australia with Landsat pictures, Landsat data, actually. So that is all examples of what it could look like. In this case, it's all using our rasterman server. And we also have shown federation, how we can connect those. And you can do data fusion. In this case, we have shown it between ECMWF in the UK and NCI Australia in Canberra in Australia. The result looks like this, for example, and this shows the query paths that go ahead. Coming back to Europe and the UK, if you want to see what the world looks like from 6 feet under, that is an image that has been produced by British Geological Service based on coverages. And one project that I wanted to mention is interesting because it's a public-private data cube partnership, where the public part is Code.de, the German Copernicus data hub, and the private thing is coming from Cloud.io, a company that has commercial data, so it needs to be protected. And that is the particular challenge here, that we need to allow combination of data sets in this federation, but we need to protect them appropriately. So that is something that is being financed by the German Ministry of Economics. And with that, let's come to one point that is, of course, the core topic here, Inspire. So how does that relate to Inspire, what I said so far? I mentioned OGC and ISO. Actually, if you look into the themes, we find lots and lots of coverages. And if you ask Jordi Escriu, who is facilitator of Cluster 3, then actually he sees coverages as the way of doing it, and WCS the natural way to serve it. Of course. But does it work? A problem is that Inspire actually was a little bit over-creative. In 2012, when they defined the Inspire coverages, then actually they brought in a few extra twists. And I believe, yes. So there is a deviation. And the interesting thing is the web coverage service, the service definition was taken from OGC as is, so actually there is a nice match. And from a service perspective, we can say, hooray, we have a basis from OGC to ISO to Inspire. But the coverage definition, the data structure, does not exactly match. There are a few issues. The derivation is GML-based, and that is not always good when you work with coverages. There is more in the world than just GML. The Inspire ID is a concept that raises problems, and we found some complexity where I really scratched my head and asked myself, why in heaven is that so complicated? Currently, there is a group working on it where I try to make a humble contribution so that we reharmonize with OGC and ISO. If you want to know more about that, either come out, visit us, or tomorrow morning in Nightingale, we will present that. That is the team working on that. We'll present their findings, and we would very much appreciate getting you there and getting your opinion on that. Because with any good luck, we have enough thrust that we can convince JRC to get back on track, and that would allow actually any vanilla implementation to serve Inspire conformant, which of course is good for the vendors, less work, and it's good for the agencies, less complexity and lower prices for the software. Okay, and with that, let me conclude. So I wanted to bring to your doors the concept of the coverage, data, and service model. It's actually a suite of standards, modularly organized. Data cubes are part of that whole thing. And once again, we have conformance testing down to the level of single pixels. There is fortunately convergence. Almost. Inspire is still a field we are working on. And open source and proprietary tools likewise implement these standards so that you have a broad basis to pick from. One of the contributors is Rasterman. That is what we provide to the community. If you want to know more about the standards, backgrounds, what's going on in coverage world, here's a URL that is maintained in the OGC realm, and it offers you more information. With that, I believe I've pretty much exhausted my time. So thank you for bearing with me. And I would stop here and hand back. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. All right. Thank you. So my name is Martin Hoogweg. I work with Esri. I manage development of our ArcGIS for Inspire product, GeoPortal server, and I am a practice manager within Esri for spatial data infrastructures. And I'll talk a little bit about increasing adoption and use of Inspire. And one of the things I will end with, actually I will start with that, and that kind of ties nicely into what Peter was saying, and that is really community participation, involvement, right? So don't just read a document after it's been published, engage in the discussion about specifications and about the things that will affect you, and through that you can kind of serve your own needs better than just being faced with a specification that you then have to implement. We try to do this as a vendor. We try to do this in the OGC world. We participate there. We participate in Inspire, not just by implementing our technology, but also by providing feedback on the specifications and so on. So there's a couple things that have been sort of affecting you and us as players, stakeholders in Inspire. Right, so this is an Inspire roadmap from a couple of years ago, all the way up to 2021, when we're all say, yes, we're done. We have implemented Inspire and it's complete. Well, obviously that's not the case, right? It's just the beginning at that point of actually putting Inspire to use and so on. During these past couple of years, there's been several moments where people have asked, are we there yet, right? What is success? Are we getting the adoption that we need to? In the beginning, it was maybe looking more at vendors like ourselves, who need to implement new specifications and so on. And at some point, it's to countries and other organizations who actually need to implement those specifications and meet the requirements, who do need the technologies and therefore depend on us and so on. And maybe now it's more, okay, so now we have a number of different vendors who provide Inspire services. We have data themes that are being implemented and so on. Where is the data, right? I don't know if the lady from the agriculture company who presented at the plenary session this morning is here. But it was kind of interesting that she basically said, if you have data, send it to me, right? Instead of, I'm going to the Inspire GeoPortal and I'll find the data there, right? So somehow there's something still missing in that connection. Right, so that's, I think, an observation that affects us all. We have the technology, we have the data models, we have the specifications, but somehow it's not there yet. Why is that? I think another interesting development over the last years has been the open data movement in a very broad sense. Right, starting off with sort of the elections in Kenya, where suddenly the election data was made available and people were democratizing data. And we had at that point, the chief technology officer of the United States calling out in one of our conferences, Viva la liberación, right? So he was liberating the data. We were all trying to do something. This is a grassroots movement, right? Bottom up. It starts at local governments who make data available and just put it out there on the web for people to find it and use it and do something interesting with it. But there's actually an interesting innovation sort of happening around it with little startups. They have hackathons, right? So there was a hackathon around the Inspire conference, but do this on a very much more frequent basis, working with local data sets and also working with local problems, right? Local challenges that affect a city, a specific city or so, rather than trying to answer these pan-European challenges. The focus is there also very much on citizen engagement, right? So do something that actually makes a difference for the people in your city. Last night, as we walked to the social event, we walked through an area where there's a lot of construction happening, and it's kind of unclear where is the walkway, where's the pathway, and how long. So where do I go to find out when this construction is over? When can I expect to sort of ride my bicycle safely and on a bike path? Right, so those are kind of questions that happen at a very local scale. And open data is kind of one of the ways that cities try to address those very local challenges. ArcGIS, as a vendor, we also advance our technology. Right? We look at all these different developments in terms of new data sources, whether they are the coverages that Peter described, data cubes. What do you do with a data cube once you have your data there? Think about having air quality data in 3 dimensions over the last 2 decades. What would you do with that data set, right? And so what we do is we look at those data sets. First of all, we need to be able to read them. So we implement coverage specifications in ArcGIS, we implement data cubes in ArcGIS and so on. And then we develop the tools to analyze this data, new ways of analyzing 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional, 5-dimensional data sets and extracting the information out of that individual pixel or collection of pixels that then allows you to answer a particular question. So we come up with machine learning algorithms, and we integrate those. We integrate with technologies like Python and R, and do Jupyter notebooks that make it very easy for data scientists who, I'm assuming there will be some of you who call yourself a data scientist, who look at this data and need to document the analysis they do. They work with this data set that lives somewhere in a cloud environment, somewhere far away, in a particular format, and then integrate that into your work. And then what you need to do, of course, is then you need to report on the work you do, right? So how do you do that? So one of the things we're trying to do is also make that reporting, that telling your story, easier using our technologies. Of course, on the computing world, the technology now is much different from several years ago. We are looking at containerization, right? Microservices, spinning up machines with ArcGIS on it very quickly, automatically, scripted, and so on, so that you can do these large-scale analyses on very large data sets using the machine resources that you need at that point. Once you're done with those analyses, those machines disappear, and you don't pay the cloud vendors the electricity bills, essentially, for machines you no longer use. Right, so essentially, I think what it means for you is you have multiple things that affect you, right? Open data movement, technology evolution, Inspire itself sort of evolving and coming out with new things. There is the sustainable development goals that have different questions from you that you may need to respond to, and so on. So you have all these different needs, essentially different stakeholders, different things that affect what you do. And my thought is one way to think about these is, well, you take a little piece of all of those different technologies, what affects you most or what affects you directly, and you sort of embed that in your organization. I try to kind of visualize that with these little bubbles, right, that are connected to these outside influences, and you adopt a little bit of that. You don't necessarily need to do everything, right? So just like you don't necessarily need to understand the full details behind the coverage implementation if you have a vendor like Peter or like ourselves who implement the coverage specification for you. You just use it, right? But what is then key is the connection to these stakeholders that live on the right-hand side, whether they are your constituents, your citizens, the people who you do the environmental reporting for, or whether they are partners, whether that's another country or the city next to you, or the transportation agency versus the city versus other kind of agencies that look at the same data. And you really start to build, I want to say, an ecosystem, right? A connection, a community around you as an organization, around the data and the problems that you address. And what we're trying to do to make things easier for you to support those constituents and those stakeholders is build a set of solution applications, right? Mobile phone apps for collecting field data, or a way for you to tell a story. We call those story maps. Or a way to make it easier to do nice looking cartographic rendering of data. We call that smart mapping, right? So we build those things into our technology that make it easier for you to tell your story and so on. And one very specific development for us over the last couple of years is this ArcGIS Hub, right? So it's really a place that you interact and engage with your constituents, focused on a set of initiatives, as we call them. And they might be bicycle safety, or they might be transportation capacity, or how do you deal with a sort of increased pressure on schooling or on other social services and so on. How do you respond to that? And how do you get your constituents to tell you what they need, or tell you what they think of the garbage collection schemes, or of the quality of the streets in your city or in your area? So those policy initiatives will then drive a set of applications for those different communities, and those applications all build on the data that you host in this environment. And of course, that data might be Inspire related data. It might be other types of data that come in, real-time data feeds or otherwise. And then you can monitor your progress towards those particular initiatives using a set of dashboards, indicators, similar to the Sustainable Development Goals, but now focused on your city. we reduced traffic fatalities for bicycles by X% after we implemented these clear lines on the street that signal this is a bike path and this is where the car should go and so on, right? So really measure the effect of the policies that you implement. Now, how this really sort of comes to life is through this website, a hub where people can go to. They can download the apps there, or they can connect to the apps using the app stores on their mobile devices. They feed you information. Waze, right? This is a nice example of an application that is like that. Has traffic information and tells you, do you need to look out for a traffic jam in this way? Well, that's really the kind of feedback that we're looking at. Then you integrate that data into your own data systems and environments, and then you can inform the people about the things that you do. So to me, increasing the adoption of Inspire is really start looking at the questions that are happening at a local level related to a very specific policy or situation or issue at a local level, and give your constituents a set of tools so that they can interact with you to provide you feedback on the things you want them to do for you. There you go. Yeah.
I'm aware of these developments, but you are very much in contact with a lot of your clients. Can you share with us like one or two stories? What was a client that has used the ArcGIS Hub that really made a big impact? I was really curious about because I see a lot of examples, but what is like your favorite story of, okay, there's this client, this municipality that made these, and it was really special for me?
So there is, I actually think it's a global program called Vision Zero, which really is geared towards reducing traffic fatalities. And one of the early implementers of the ArcGIS Hub is the city of Los Angeles, close to our home, of course, who really adopted this as a program. And for them, it has really sort of kickstarted the rejuvenation, or right, the modernization, the renewal of things that were happening in the city, and for them, really, it ties nicely to I guess the 2028 Olympics that Los Angeles was sort of competing for. In the end, they got selected for it. One of the main drivers for them, or selling points for those Olympics, was transportation, right? Because it's a congested area. A lot of people moving around, going to work and so on. How do you deal with, in that congested situation, with having all this additional traffic related to the Olympics, because the venues will be spread out and so on, and people will have to move around. So what they were able to do with this is to tie what's happening in terms of transportation improvement projects that they were planning as part of their selling point for the Olympics, to measuring real success in terms of reducing this other goal that in itself had nothing to do with the Olympics, but is kind of a nice combination of the two objectives of the city. Yeah.
Thank you. I am Alejandro Guinea. I work in Geogramma. It's a private company. We do GIS and mapping services. I'm going to talk about, not about how to reach Inspire, but what to do once we have the Inspire compliant datasets. I don't have much time, so I will just speak about 3 topics. One is asking ourselves, why do we want Inspire compliant datasets? And do like the children and asking why, and when you get the answer, you ask why again. Then I will talk some technical questions, but very at a high level because of the time, about the access of the data and working with data. We are very lucky because we had the opportunity to work with all the datasets that a lot of people is preparing and is publishing, and I think we got some interesting conclusions. First, we are in a marathon, or we think that we are in a marathon. We started in 2007, somebody told me yesterday that we started even before, and I have bad news. When we will get the 2021, we are not finishing anything. We are just starting the next phase. That's why we have to ask ourselves if this is a marathon or this is at least a triathlon. And to do that, as I said, the trick is to ask ourselves, why do we want to be inspired compliant? Like the children, we get some answer. Yesterday in a nice presentation, they were talking about how do you explain your children what are you work when you go to the office. Someone said, what I do is to help the countries to exchange their data. And that is true, but I would like to ask then why you are doing that. So, if we are in this race, the marathon, we are doing this because, of course, we have to. We have to, it's a rule. I say that because, you know, some people doesn't feel like, I don't have time, I don't have money, you know, they put the law and then, you know, who pays that? Welcome to the citizens' world. I mean, that is the normal situation. And we have some tasks like create metadata, create catalogs, transform data from our corporative schemas to the Inspire data specifications. Once we have that, we publish data, we publish services, and hopefully we will make all of them interoperable, okay? But then I have to ask again, why are we doing that? I'm sorry, there's another race. I know that the triathlon has different order, okay? But we have to get the bike, and we have to start another race, no matter if you are tired. And then we will start working with Cascade services. Yesterday, in the presentation of the GeoPortal, we can already see a bit of this in the thematic viewer, which is collecting automatically the services and is presenting the information and is working everything quite with a lot of automation. We have to be able to do automatic updates of the information. After that, we have to develop tools, vertical tools, something which will help us to solve real-life problems. We have to create information, joining and combining datasets. And, of course, we have to try to do all automatic to make it easier. But we have another race. We have to swim now. And at the very end, what we have to do is to improve Europe's environment and to save lives or to improve lives. We cannot forget that our aim is not to publish geographic information. We have to think at the end. We have to ask why at least 20 times. Now, more or less, we are here. We are at the end of the Inspire implementation. We are publishing data and services. November 2017, we already have some data sets. And as I said, I am very lucky because I could work with those data sets that people was publishing. And just in case someone thinks that I'm exaggerating or I am a bit dramatic with this thing of saving lives, I want you to see this image. This happened last week in Spain. This woman was trying to hold herself in the window while the whole river was along the street. You can see the cars floating down there. And those are just, a quick reflection about what data sets will be helpful here for the guy who was designing this village in this case. I have to say congratulations to Spain, to the government of Spain, because they have all the data available and free and a lot of barriers that I'm going to speak about now. They don't have issues to work with the information. I can say climate, elevations, building, hydrography, hydrology, population, and so on. I will tell you what happened with this woman at the end, I promise. Okay, let's go a bit with few time in the technical questions. The first problems related with the access of the data are the lack of availability. It's really difficult to find the information. This exercise we did with administrative units, and we didn't find them. We found some of them. Sometimes you find them, but then you have to contact the data provider, and they don't answer. Sometimes they are there, but you don't know. Sometimes they just don't exist. Like in some country that, I'm sorry, they don't exist in my country. Okay, there is a lack of availability. It's obvious, but when you start working with the data, that is a big problem. Everybody knows. Yesterday was a whole presentation about that. Then the authentication systems. I know the coordinators say, I want to know who is doing what with my data. They say that. I would love in the webpage of my company to know the same. I know who is reading what in my webpage, but I cannot put an authentication service because nobody will go to my webpage even to know what is my telephone number, for example. So I understand that, but that is a real barrier. Sometimes there are really nice and easy ways to register and really fast, and you get the authentication, and that's all. But it's an issue to download the information. The web applications, you know, they are very good for the citizens. You go to a very nice interface, you navigate, you choose the themes, you click, you download, you choose the format, and you have it in your computer. That is good for the citizens, but it's not good when you are trying to really work with the data. Imagine like 100 different themes or different sheets, you know, and you have to go one by one downloading them. But even when you get to the direct download, you have FTP, Atom, direct links. Sometimes you write them. They send you a downloaded link via email, and you have to accept the conditions and that. So it's nothing standardized yet. And then the download service, that is cool. If you get there, you have a lot of facilities. I mean, it's easy to do, but even there, the WFS is quite tricky. You know, only with the limits of features, you have problems. You have to develop a special application to download your information. But okay, not with whole countries in Europe, but we did it. We have all the information in our hard disk. In this case, administrative units, okay? What happened when we start working with the data? The aim was really easy. We wanted to put it in a PostGIS database. So we can zoom, we can click, and we can print it, okay? Nothing very difficult. We found that sometimes there are missing features. Sometimes it's because there are a demo version, and because it's a demo version, it's just a part of the data. Sometimes they forgot, and sometimes they don't exist. Scale is very important, the scale, but I'm sure I asked 4 of you, what is the scale? Each of one will tell me a different answers about what does it mean and why it's useful. For us, it was very important to know if we were working with very detailed information or not, and it's one of the few parameters that we have to know the detail of the information. And this one is very, very important. You have to understand the local knowledge. No matter is you download it, you have in your computer, and then Europe is incredible. You know, even with something as simple as administrative units, it's very different in each situation. Sometimes you have autonomous cities, sometimes you have provinces, regions, municipalities, but in each country have a different meaning. So if you have to work with it, you have to go to Wikipedia and read it and study it. Organization of datasets, what means? You get a GML with all the administrative units, but in another country, they decided to put one GML for each level, for example. It's something easy to handle with, but you have to do it. And the version of schemas, the version is always an issue, but you have to develop a special process for each version. One country have one version, another one has another one, then they change it and that. And the last group of issues working with the data, something like data types. It should be already standardized, but when you have codes, IDs, and some is using numbers, and the other is using number and letters. Okay, that is a problem already, and we found that. Inconsistencies between borders, between the countries, but I have to say that that is really cool to say and really cool to see, but it's not a big problem with administrative units. There is some gaps between Spain and France, for example, in the middle of the Pyrenees, that nobody's there, but yes, I think I will show you. But it's not a problem, you know, for emergencies, for a lot of statistical works or whatever, it's not a problem. Licensing. Yesterday there was as well the whole presentation about licenses, and that is a problem because once you get the data, you don't know what to do, you can do with it. And GML is very, very tricky when you are working with it. So, this is the woman. I wanted to put her face here. The woman finally didn't manage to hold herself anymore. She fell, and a bit before, a car broke a window of a pharmacy, and she managed to save her life in that pharmacy. I don't know how, but I want to put a face here because we don't have to forget when we are publishing information that this is the last target that we have to take into account. Thank you very much, and if you want to discuss this, if you don't agree with this, I would love to discuss with you. But to share what in more detail what were our experience. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Alejandro. It was a very interesting story, and that it brought us through your story. And it's also nice to remember why are we doing this, so that to keep us also motivated, like a boost in the armor. Questions from the audience for Alejandro? Some questions? Or a comment, maybe? Also, how interesting it was. Doesn't have to be a question. Thank you. Your name?
Yeah, Pierre Vergès from French National Council of Information. I have a question about, did you try to work with the ILS platform from Eurogeographics? ILS platform.
Yeah, from, because the example was about the administrative units.
Yes, no, we didn't because at the end, what we saw, at least what we managed to see, is that they are trying to create a WFS in Cascade, but they are calling the national WFS. So we work with WFS, more or less. That's what we found. Nothing that you cannot download yourself on your own. And we wanted to download it and to put it in a PostGIS database. And we wanted to get, as Inspire says, get the data from the source, directly from the source.
Thank you for your spelling, Mr. Chair, because most of the European people cannot spell my name correctly. My name is Hüseyin Bayraktar. I'm from Turkey, from Ministry of Environment and Urbanization, and I am the Deputy General Director of General Geographical Information Systems. We made a project called Technical Assistance for Capacity Building in Horizontal Sector for the implementation of Inspire Directive. And you know, Turkey is a candidate country for European Union. And this project is an IPA project, Instrument for Pre-Accession Assistance. DGGIS is responsible for national spatial data infrastructure and coordination, establishing and maintaining the national geoportal, regulations for urban information systems in Turkey, and now national geoportal has been developed, and NSTI and urban information system standards have been determined in recent years. Currently, NSTI strategy is being prepared and NSTI standards are being revisited according to the necessities. And also the smart city strategy and its action plan is now prepared nationally in Turkey. Project was carried out between March 2016 and March 2018 under the supervision of our ministry. The aim of the project is to increase the technical and administrative capacity in Turkey in line with the standards of INSPIRE. Project consists of three basic components: reporting, software development, training, and awareness activities. In geographical data exchange strategy, the current NSTI activities take into consideration INSPIRE standards with a view to form exchange and share framework of geographical data in Turkey. Organization plan guides the process management activities performed effectively and efficiently both by the institutions and local governments to build the structure and terms of reference and other activities necessary to ensure sustainability. The main objective of the data evaluation and inventory report is to match geographical data supplied from different institutions by local governments and generated specifically to the area in order to offer municipality solutions in their respective areas with data teams included in INSPIRE Directive. With these draft regulations and agreements, standard geographical production using these modules are aimed to be widespread throughout the country. You see, these are our pilot municipalities. The pilot municipalities selected as much as possible of the data and datasets defined in Annexes 1, 2, and 3 of the INSPIRE Directive. On large scale, Kayseri and middle scale, we can say province of Istanbul Pendik municipality, and a small scale municipality is Elazığ municipality, and we took Muğla municipality because they have a special environment protection region, a large region, and therefore we selected these municipalities. The awarenesses of the project and the accumulation of existing knowledge have been ensured by activities carried out for public, academia, and private sector to provide decision makers and technical professionals at the national level for the establishment of the NSTI. 5 courses, 4 seminars, and 3 workshops were organized, and a total of almost 1,300 people from ministries, local administrations, universities, and private sector attended the activities. Basically, 3 main software are developed: process management, INSPIRE training portal, and cloud-based geographical modules have been developed. Geospatial software modules are developed by joining main functions such as drawing, viewing, editing, reporting, and sharing with municipal workflow processes. These modules include topographic base map, address assessment, infrastructure module, building inventory module, expropriation, land readjustment, application cemetery module, and urban information module, which makes 3D visualization, editing, querying, and analysis based on standards such as CityGML. Municipalities are the main resources and users of the spatial data in INSPIRE context. In Turkey, we have almost 1,400 municipalities, diverse in scale, population, and economical growth. Especially medium and small-scale municipalities have some deficiency in IT investment, and human resources. These municipalities are main beneficiaries of the project. Software development activities of the project provide a complementary cloud infrastructure and Geospatial modules in the act of urban information system. Urban information system is a serving model tool for local governments by benefiting from GIS and MIS technologies. It also acts as an instrument in the context of smart cities. Within the scope of this project, 13 applications has been developed, including 8 Geospatial modules for the free use of municipalities. A vast majority of the municipality business processes consist of integrated data within the address. So the address module, especially buildings, streets, etc., is very important that the data is served to the other modules. The buildings and the address system in Turkey links together. Thus, it's aimed to be used by the local governments as a common GIS tool. The data entry window supports the defined geometry and address standards. One of the main needs of the local governments is to be able to present the relevant data teams, building, land use, environmental monitoring facilities, POIs, etc., to the community as stated in the Inspire Directive. People can make coordinate and address search, route and directions, distance and area measurement, POI search, something like that. Urban renewal is also another important issue for Turkey. Thus, the tool let governments local governments to present the situation before and after the planned urban renewal. Building information management model provides a building management system that should build on CityGML standards. The tool provides not only geometric representation and query, but also semantic features. The model represents detailed information regarding the selected building. Similarly, the model lets users to enter and edit textual and graphics content. You know the topographic map model is a standard topographic map model. It's expropriation model. It makes municipalities make expropriation more easier and efficient. Article 18 model. Article 18 is a part of Turkish construction law. Land readjustments within the implementation spatial plan is about that. It's very important for the municipalities. Infrastructure model. Most infrastructure data in our country is kept on CAT platforms, and this model will play an active role in transferring these data into the GIS and working in harmony with other geographical informations. This model enables editing and management of underground facilities. Cemetery geo-management model is also a very important model for the municipalities because municipalities serves from all of the religions in cemetery. And this model is very important for the municipalities. Software development activities, the software can also be developed by the municipalities. And the Ministry of Environment and Urbanization has developed the cloud-based geographical modules. We have a server, a very strong server in our ministry and serving to the municipalities. As a result of the works carried out in coordination with the Ministry of Interior, Cloud-based municipality project aims to provide services in an integrated way to establish the infrastructure of urban information systems. There are two parts of this project. Geographical part is made by us, DGGIS, and the other part is about MIS, and it's done by Ministry of Interior. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. It was very interesting to see the steps you're taking in Turkey towards also the Inspire. Sometimes we forget. Any questions from the audience? We have a question there and a question here. I'm coming. Please state your name and affiliation.
Good afternoon, Michelle Klaas from the Ministry of the Presidency, Department of Environment, Guyana. We're about to build a similar system, or we have a similar project that you have implemented. Could you go back to, I think it's Article 17, module? 18. No, the one before 18.
This one? Yes.
No, the 17, Article 17. Right. And could you, no, the one before that. Yes, could you explain the process for me, please?
In Turkey, expropriation is limited by the law, and this model makes the whole system to exploration, and a municipality can make the all expropriation things from this model. I don't know, maybe we can discuss after this.
Is there a process in order to
yes.
get the right paperwork in place? Huh? Yeah, just, you were wondering what was it doing. We have one more question.
Yes, Stefan Jensen from the European Environment Agency. I was wondering, you are nicely starting this now in 4 regions. What is your plan to scale this across Turkey? Is that depending on EU funding, let's say, or what is the Turkish initiative to scale this type of work within Turkey?
We will use our national funds to make this project used by all over the country, but it's not a must. The municipalities who needs these kind of things will use these cost-free. We are also supplying the basic data such as true orthophotos, ortho imageries from space, or something like that. And these are also free of charge. And this is up to the municipalities. They can use it or not. But our aim in this project is the small and medium municipalities.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jason King. I work within the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs in the UK. My presentation this afternoon is in respect of what are called Brownfield Land Registers. This presentation is only in respect of England, and I will explain as I go through the presentation as to why that is the case. So firstly, what is brownfield land? In effect, it's any land which was previously occupied with a permanent structure, primarily industrial land, but where that land is now in disrepair, potentially contaminated, no longer used. There are a few exceptions to this rule. Agricultural forestry buildings, minerals extraction where there is already restoration processes in place and development procedures and controls, and private residential gardens, parks, and other recreational facilities. And as you see there with the final bullet point, it's previously developed, but as I say, if the permanent structure has effectively been worn away over time and it's been degraded to such an extent that it's no longer deemed to be an existing structure in the original form, then that again could come under an exclusion. So what information are we actually talking about here? Well, in effect, last year, a piece of legislation was implemented which required local authorities in England to actually produce, maintain, publish a register of all of their brownfield land. And it had to be done in a designated format. The Department for Communities and Local Government, they stipulated that within the legislation, the format itself would be designated by the Secretary of State. The reason being, one, they wanted to be able to obtain the information and reuse that information, but more importantly, they wanted the data to be in a standardized form so that anybody, whether it be a developer, members of the public, and the like, could actually get the data from any local authority and they can do a compare and contrast exercise. The legislation came into force April last year. The first registers were required to be published at the end of last year, and these have to be updated on an annual basis. The final bullet point there is that the Department for Communities, Local Government has now been merged into a new Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. It effectively has the same roles and responsibilities, and for the purposes of the Brownfield Land Register, there are no changes. So why am I actually here talking about Brownfield Land Registers and Inspire? Quite simply, there is quite a good link. If you look at the definition of what the Brownfield Land is supposed to do, it refers to standardized information, it refers to keeping the data up to date, making the data publicly available, and as I indicated earlier, it's really also about making and providing certainty for local authorities, developers, communities, and more importantly, to encourage investment on brownfield land. The UK, along with many countries, have a significant housing issue, housing shortage, and therefore if we can make use of brownfield land, it reduces some of those burdens. Aggregation of data. Well, you can only aggregate the data if you're referring to data of a similar type and format. The Brownfield Land Register falls under the Inspire land use theme. And what's actually been done is we've considered all of the ways in which the data is produced from the word go, how that data is published, and how that data is made available, ultimately through the EU Geoportal. You look at the Inspire principles. Effectively, all of those principles are covered within the requirements for the Brownfield Land Register and the regulations. It's about data being readily available, transparently available, data that can be used at multiple scales, as we heard in one of the previous presentations. But it's also about having good governance and having good data management. In England, we have in the region of 330 local authorities, all of which will have their own data governance and data management activities. What we tried to do in respect to this project was trying to bring together the best parts of that data governance and data management and to look at the standards that were being applied. In the UK, to facilitate the Inspire metadata publishing, we have what's known as the UK Gemini data format or data specification. That specification does provide fully compliant metadata records. The publishing has to be done through the data.gov.uk data website, and the validation and the processes that are produced are fully validated at the point of publishing. We also have what's known as the UK Metadata Editor, which enables fully compliant metadata to be produced by public sector bodies and ultimately published directly onto the data.gov.uk. As you see there, the metadata can be downloaded in various formats, and also the links obviously to network services and other information, whether it be license requirements, restrictions of use, etc. That's all included. So what has the project delivered? In conjunction with iStand UK, which is an organisation set up primarily for local authorities to produce similar data specifications and data standards, we worked to produce a series of how-to guides. Effectively, that covered the whole process right the way through, from the point of data collection right the way through to the production of Inspire metadata, Inspire network services, download services, and the like. We ran a series of training workshops in very much a similar format to those that we've just heard from our Turkish colleague. By bringing together the data users and the data providers, we found it far easier to actually demonstrate not only the benefits of the approach being taken, but also to be able to develop data templates, the guidance, and the data standard that goes with both the Inspire land use theme, but also to enable automated harvesting through tagging of the Brownfield registers from data.gov.uk to the ministry concerned. The approach is very similar to the one that the EEA, under Staffan's project management, are currently looking at in respect of environmental monitoring and reporting. Through the tagging process, effectively, the ministry can go in, they can obtain the data directly, they can have all of the relevant links, and in doing so, not only does it reduce the burden on the local authorities, but it also means that the data is being produced in an Inspire compliant format from the very outset. The links there obviously to the standard itself and also to some other guidance. I mean, that is a very brief overview as to the project. The biggest aspect really was about engaging with the data providers at an early stage so that they could provide input into the standards that were being developed, the various technologies that were being used across the different local authorities, because with 330 different authorities, there are 330 different approaches being taken, even if they were using the same technical process. So on that note, I would like to finish my presentation. Thank you for listening. If there are any questions, please ask.
Thank you, Jason. Questions from the audience?
Thanks, Jason. Michael Lutz, JRC. I was a bit surprised that you use land use as a theme to cover your brownfields, because my understanding would be that land use, you use it for mapping different land uses in an area, whereas the brownfields, as far as I understand, is more a kind of a managed area. So I was wondering whether you're actually attaching any additional information related to things you can do on those brownfield sites, or restrictions and stuff like that to the data.
Yeah,
and why you made a choice for land use rather than area management, for example.
The reason that land use was chosen primarily is because the brownfield sites have two aspects. One, where the land has been identified as being potentially available for reuse. But the second part is where there is a presumption for planning permission to be available. Therefore, it's deemed as under the planning strategy or area management controls within the local authority, and therefore the land use was deemed as being a good starting point. But I appreciate the comment you're making about area management, but there are no management controls as such that, within the brownfield sites at that stage. Potentially going forward, as the sites do come under management or under construction, then it could well fall under one of the other themes. But what the actual data modelling and data mapping exercise did was to identify those elements that were originally missing from the original data specification provided by the ministry for the registry, to incorporate that within the Inspire side. Okay.
Thank you. It was a very good question. One more fast question, good answer also.
Thank you. Marc Leobev, point of contact in France. So we choose land use too, but my question is, you really got the legislation in the same year that you applied for every your municipalities, all that production? Because it is so short, I'm surprised.
Yeah, as was I. I was only asked to actually look at the Inspire element in, I think it was March last year, when we ran a series of workshops with local authorities. Fortunately, the sort of partnership that we had with iStand UK, whose role is to deliver open standards for local authorities, meant that we could push forward very quickly the process. And because the requirement hadn't yet taken effect with local authorities, it meant that they were going to be delivering data from December in an Inspire compliant manner. So there was no transformation activity required. And actually starting from a zero baseline was far better than having data that was already in existence, which you then have to go through interoperability, transformation, and the like. We could actually push the process and push the way we wanted the data to be produced.
Yeah, thank you. Is it the last one?
Hello, my name is Jeff Connon from Luxembourg. You described how the data got produced and then uploaded to data.gov, but how does it finally end up in a view service or a download service for Inspire? I didn't get that link right.
Yeah, sorry. So the requirement to produce view and download services still obviously applies. Therefore, the data itself is still going to have polygons attached to that and the download services. The links to that data, to those network services are obviously included within the metadata element. But the actual view and download services is produced as part of the Brownfield Site Register activity.